Welcome to Watching the Horizon. I'm Jake. I had a subscriber the other day send me a message wanting to know what was the most likely SHTF scenario that we should be prepping for. And honestly, I don't know that there's just one. I started thinking about it and I came up with a small list, and depending on where you are in the world, many of these are happening right now. But as far as here in the US, I think that most of these have already occurred, and given a long enough timeline, all of them definitely will occur. So let's kind of go over what we got here. No particular order on the list, but yeah, so tell me what you think. So the first thing on my list I've put down is natural disasters. So natural disasters by far is the most frequent of scenarios here in the US and has probably affected the most number of people cumulatively. I think that if for no other reason, every family, not just in the US, but in the world, should have some sort of level of preparedness for natural disasters. It's, man against nature. That's just kind of how it is. So prepare yourself just in case. You never know. So natural disasters can include things like, earthquakes, floods, tornadoes, hurricanes, fire, you name it. Depending on where you live in the United States, you're going to have natural disasters that are going to be more prone in your area than others. So if you're in the middle of Arizona, chances of you getting a hurricane are pretty small. But definitely, consider what it is in your area that's most likely, and then, obviously prepare for those types of things. If you just need extra food and water because, maybe you're a one-road town and it's definitely likely that some sort of fire or earthquake or something can disrupt that road and services get cut off, then yeah, prepare for that. If you're in a flood-prone region, obviously, food, water, containers, maybe a boat, something that's going to help you, deal with that kind of thing. I think that natural disasters are sort of a domino event. While in and of themselves, they can be fairly specific as far as their geographic effect. I definitely think that a natural disaster has the ability to cause, secondary issues, secondary disasters, so to speak, that are actually on this list. So even though a hurricane might come in and completely flood a town, there's two disasters that you need to potentially prepare for. Some of the spin-offs to consider are going to be that you could be looking at civil unrest, which is actually the second thing on my list. Civil unrest can be very specific in the area that it affects. I do believe that a lot of the civil unrest we're seeing in the news right now, even though it's getting a lot of news time, in the big scheme of things, it's not really a problem. Mostly because the instances are mostly just for show. I think that they're just, there to make headlines. They might even be organized, they might not be organized, but because they're not so big or widespread, it's not overwhelming any kind of system. They're definitely sort of a touch and go kind of thing, at least what's going on right now. And obviously, if you've been affected by this, if you happen to be one of the business owners that, got their place torched or, vandalized, obviously that's horrible, and I'm deeply sorry. But as far as something that we need to, really prepare ourselves for, I'm generally speaking about some sort of event that would cause multiple riots, multiple acts of outcry from the people that do end up overwhelming the system. The kind of thing maybe equivalent to the LA riots. I mean, that lasted for almost a week. Well, imagine if we had that kind of scenario, but not just in LA, but in every major city across the United States. Well, what kind of event could cause that? Well, it could be a natural disaster. It could be political. I mean, it could be all manner of things. But the point is that civil unrest is very real, and if it ever got out of control, it could get very, very dangerous very quickly. So definitely something to prepare for. Next on my list is pandemic. Now, you say the word and, images of movies and, rabid monkeys might come to mind. But while that's technically true, there's definitely lots of weaponized versions of, flu and measles and smallpox and, whatever else is out there. Pandemic could also simply be caused by, a natural disaster. Your services get shut down. You're not able to have proper sanitation. Your drinking water gets contaminated, and now all of a sudden you have widespread pandemic. Obviously, some of the more scary that we've seen, are going to be, viruses. I mean, there's the Zika virus, obviously Ebola, that kind of thing, small bird flu, I don't know, swine flu, take your pick. I definitely think that some sort of pandemic event is certainly possible. They're definitely happening in other countries right now. The United States, being as wealthy as it is, with access to lots of clean water and really good sanitation, we're really good about pandemics not really being a problem here. But if anything should happen to that infrastructure, either through maybe some sort of terrorist attack, or again just a natural disaster, or just some other deficiency in our infrastructure, we could be looking at a very serious pandemic issue very quickly. So that's something I think you definitely need to prepare for. And honestly, I don't think enough people prepare for a pandemic instance. I mean, other than, people talking about, oh, you should wash your hands more and, maybe wear a mask. A lot of people in, China wear masks. There's not a whole lot of procedure when it comes to preparing for that kind of thing. So I think that, getting some sort of pandemic kit, getting more practiced in, how to handle that kind of situation, so that if you're in a pandemic SHTF scenario and you need to go out and come back, how do you not infect everybody back at your home? Especially against, a virus or bacteria or something like that. That's very difficult to fight against, because you can't see it, and just, one forgetful moment, could kill everybody. So pandemic, definitely on the list, definitely happening right now in many places across the world, definitely prep worthy, in my opinion. Next is economic collapse. I really think that this is likely. I don't know how soon. I think there's lots of different games that we can play as a country to kind of stave off that from happening. I'm not going to claim to be any kind of financial genius or anything like that, but the debt that this country is taking on, year after year, presidency after presidency, is just amazing. And we're not paying off this debt, we're just paying the interest. And at some point, if we don't make some major corrections, we can't just perpetually do this forever. It just can't happen. I mean, look at the housing crisis, or the mortgage bubble. It was great while it lasted, and then all of a sudden things did come crashing down. I think because they had to. I don't think it could have even artificially kept going. It has to course correct at some point, and that's kind of what I feel like, regarding an economic collapse for the United States. We are we're kind of a runaway train here, and it's not going to end well. Um, it could be triggered by us if we just continue to spend like we do, if we keep doing the same practices, raising the debt ceiling, throwing billions and billions and trillions of dollars that we don't have towards programs. It doesn't even matter what the program is anymore. It's just that we're worse than a teenager with daddy's credit card. It's just insane that we're hemorrhaging so much money. But an economic collapse could actually be triggered by somebody other than us. China, especially, they own a considerable amount of our debt. They have a vested interest in us. They don't necessarily want to see us collapse, but I certainly don't think that it's off the table if it would protect their interests at home. I know that the petrodollar is something that's kind of propping up our economy, and I know that that's something that China's working against right now. If all of a sudden you could buy oil internationally with a different currency other than the dollar, that right there, we'd be ruined. Even if they kept us as a petrodollar, but there was just an alternative, they don't even have to switch over. Just hint at there being an alternative, and we'd come crashing down. I don't think that would be a very good day. Is it possible? Most certainly. There's countries actively working towards it right now. And the whole petrodollar arrangement thing is just that. It's an arrangement, and an arrangement can be, well, rearranged. So, economic collapse. Definitely something to consider, worth prepping for. Just look at other economic collapses that's happened in the world. Some have been more bloody than others, but yeah, you're going to want to prepare food, water, all the essentials. That might be one that could take a very, very long time to come out of. So definitely worth prepping for. Next on my list is nuclear war. I think that sort of the climate right now, lots of people are afraid of nuclear war again. The big problem with nuclear war is that if it did happen, it would definitely change probably all future wars going forward. And as more and more countries gain access to a nuclear arsenal, it's just the sheer number of possibilities of having a nuclear exchange, keep going up year after year. It's bound to happen. We know that other countries out there have absolutely no problem using chemical weapons, many against their own people. But I think that as nuclear ordnance becomes more widely available, and it is, the likelihood of it being used, even if it didn't happen here in the United States, the fact that it got used anywhere kind of breaks the seal, so to speak, as far as its use. Is it possible that another country will use a nuclear weapon against the United States in a preemptive type strike? Definitely. Absolutely. I mean, it was sort of our excuse, sort of. I definitely think that that's possible. So, nuclear war, I believe that it's survivable, most definitely, as long as it wasn't, directly on your head that one of those things landed. I know that other countries are certainly preparing their citizens for it. I think we should too. I do feel a little bit like we're putting our head in the sand, that we're not sort of addressing the nuclear threat, or at least the real possibility of nuclear threat. Perhaps that's by design. I don't know. But I think that having the proper preps for a nuclear attack are definitely necessary, and not super difficult either. Yeah, you can get yourself, into, a bomb shelter, But I think for the majority of Americans, what you're really going to need to look into is just a fallout shelter. If you can prepare, enough food, water, sanitation, some special air filters, really all you need to prepare for, at least as far as fallout goes, if there should be some sort of explosion near you and you're in the fallout path, you're looking at about 2 weeks, which I think is definitely doable. So, nuclear war, I think that it's likely. I definitely think it could happen here in the United States. Could be just a question of time. I don't know. But I hope we never have to go through it. But the preps necessary for it aren't extreme. They're not super terrible. So definitely worth prepping for. The last thing that made my list, I know that there's honestly plenty more. This video could just go on for days. Probably already has, sorry. Is a power outage. Some sort of grid down event. How that happens, lots of things. Again, natural disaster could cause it. It could be, a nuclear strike. It could just be a plain old EMP or even one of those solar flares, the coronal mass ejections. Again, we've experienced that before in the past, and it has in fact done damage. The likelihood, I think, of having a mass-wide grid down event is highly likely. Now, our infrastructure here in the US is sort of designed to fail, so to speak. If any particular node becomes overloaded, it just turns off. And it will create this cascading domino effect where you just end up with huge areas of geographic space without power. And really that's by design, not really only just so that there's no damage to the machinery. It's a lot easier to flip a switch back on something that's been turned off than have to rebuild something from scratch. So that's kind of the idea behind a lot of the power infrastructure here in the US. Even some of our largest power outages that have already occurred, power has been back up within a few days at the most, and then depending on kind of how rural you are, it's taken longer. But as far as affecting the most number of people on a wide scale, I do think that an EMP or a solar flare is likely to happen. Again, it could be one of those first strike kind of instances. I know that there have been commissions and even Congress a few years back put together a committee to take a look at it, and that was one of the more scary ones that I looked into, because it was their opinion in their investigation that if there would be an EMP attack against the United States, we could be looking at a 90% fatality rate within the first year. Well, how is it that just turning off the lights would lead to so many deaths? And I don't think that directly it would cause that many deaths, but it's all those other things that we just kind of went over in this list. I think that it would cause pandemic. I think that sanitation would become an issue, clean water. That alone, you're probably talking millions of people dying just from that. You're gonna get disruption of food and water. People are going to be rioting, looting, arson, everything. So it's almost like if there was some sort of massive, grid down event where it caused real damage and they couldn't just flip a switch to turn the systems back on again. That's sort of like a surprise package where it's like everything all rolled into one. In my opinion, other than a nuclear incident, it's almost the worst possible scenario, because it's kind of got a taste of all the other scenarios all wrapped into one. So definitely worth preparing for. So Anyway, that's my list. What do you think? I would like to know if I missed any or what your opinions are. Am I wearing a tinfoil hat here? Am I totally off base on some of these? Let me know. I'm sure you will. I do appreciate you watching, and just be sure to keep your eyes open.